Paul Thomas Anderson is known for producing other masterpieces, such as There Will Be Blood and The Master. But perhaps his most unique of these is his 2014 film, Inherent Vice. The movie is ranked 75th in BBC's top 100 greatest films of all time. The film possesses many qualities of a masterpiece, from its character development and performances, to its underlying themes and messages about American society and coping with loss. Starring the likes of Joaquin Phoenix, Josh Brolin, and Owen Wilson, the movie takes place in 1970 Los Angeles, California, with Phoenix's Doc Botello, a hippie pot-smoking private investigator who gets sucked into a whirlwind of drug syndicates and corrupt neo-Nazi real estate agents. According to Pauline Kael, a film requires a strong narrative for it to be considered a masterpiece. By those standards, I believe Kael would have agreed that this film belongs on the list. In Manohla Dargis's review of the film, she talks about how the story bounds around from one informant to another, dragging Doc down the rabbit hole, quote-unquote. The film has a pretty convoluted plot, with many varying storylines, all following every detail of Doc's journey. This can be disorienting at times because he consumes mass amounts of hallucinogenic drugs along the way, making it hard to tell what in the story is real and what is perhaps a hallucination. Having an unreliable narrator can make the story hard to captivate an audience, which Kael argues is crucial to a masterpiece. But I think that's exactly what grabs the audience's attention. The movie isn't so much about the external plot, but about the journey of Doc through all of this chaos. He's approached by an ex-lover, Shasta Faye Hepworth, who he clearly isn't over, and lets himself be manipulated into helping her. Then, throughout his journey, he encounters corrupt businessmen, Nazis, and drugged-out doctors. He goes out of his way to help Shasta and doesn't lose his sense of morality. Characters often undergo change or growth through a story, but Doc stays somewhat the same throughout. This helps keep the viewer grounded, with the crazy conspiracy theory corkboard of a plot. Dargis argues that Anderson was perfect for this film for his talent at minimizing the plot of a book while maintaining the story's integrity. There's a lot going on, but at the same time, there's little action. The movie is driven by the life of the characters and how they interact with one another. Performances by Phoenix and Brolin are crucial to the life of the film. Their dialogue and interactions with each other are comical breaks in the story, being polar opposites of each other. Brolin's Bjornson, a hippie-hating dirty cop, and Doc, a hippie himself. The scene where Bjornson calls Doc and tells him Shasta has disappeared, there's not really a lot going on, just the two of them talking. The scene is framed with both of them on close-ups, forcing them to drive the scene with facial expressions. The way Doc reacts to the initial thought that Shasta is gone, to the way he reacts when Bjornson admits that she's just disappeared, is intelligent. It builds on the tension of the plot and then collapses into a comical argument. Paul Thomas Anderson, in an interview with Zyzax TV, talks about how Jonathan Demme was one of his biggest inspirations as a filmmaker for his use of head-on camera angles and close-ups during dialogue, specifically in Silence of the Lambs. Anderson also notes that it's easier to frame a story with just dialogue rather than action, like two people sitting at a coffee shop talking. Inherent Vice is no different. It relies heavily on dialogue through over-the-shoulder shots and close-ups, especially on Doc. Many of the dialogue sequences involve either close-ups on the characters themselves, or they use these slow pull-ins that, according to Vice in an interview with Anderson, make you feel privy to a private conversation. This is how much of the film is shot. With each conversation, the viewer feels like they're being let in on a secret, and then each conversation peels back another layer of the story. I think in terms of other masterpieces we have watched, Inherent Vice reminds me of the comedy. They share a similar, meandering story of a character through whatever they're doing. The main difference being, there's not much of an external plot to the comedy, making the main character's actions feel episodic. I enjoyed both movies, but Inherent Vice was definitely more compelling, mainly because Doc's character and journey are more likable. The film also feels very similar to the greatest movie of the century, Mulholland Drive. They both have very complex plots, Mulholland Drive being a bit more jarring and confusing throughout. They both share the attention to characters. They feel alive, and their interactions drive the story rather than what they're actually trying to accomplish. It does not, however, relate very well to Tokyo Story. The cinematography and character development feel very different. Tokyo Story's plot is more structured and doesn't confuse the viewer as much. I think this semester, The Master was probably the movie that surprised me the most. I had only seen parts of it before screening it, and wasn't sure what I thought about it. But the characters really sucked me in. It had a big hand in my decision to watch Inherent Vice, and I was not disappointed. Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance was amazing, making Lancaster Dodd likable at times and despicable at others. Overall, Inherent Vice, through its mastery of performance, introspective camera angles, and character development, is inherently a masterpiece and is yet another success in Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography.